Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to another edition of Conversations about Art. My name is Alan Constant. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm here with Paul Rowland, who currently resides in Tokyo, Japan. Today, we are having a conversation with Philip Maltman, an artist from Dulwich, England. So I'd like to welcome you, Philip.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
The first thing I'd like to hear about is your any art education you've had and how you got started in art.
Well, I was born in Scotland in 1950, and I was very fortunate to go to a local school which had a really exciting art department. And so by the time I was about 10 or 11, I was being taught by a man called Bill Lockhart, whose art rooms were filled with sort of current music playing, and books on abstract artists like Kandinsky, which were quite sort of forward thinking. This around about 1960, 61. Um, so from there, I went to I'd been looking at sort of magazines and things about art schools and so on, and I saw some information about Hornsey College of Art in one of the Sunday magazines. Um, that kind of inspired me. I suddenly thought this is the kind of place I want to go to. But I was in Scotland, and everybody in Scotland at that time would go to, and the West Coast would go to Glasgow School of Art. That was it. That's where you went. So I couldn't see any real way that I was ever going to go to Hornsey, except my family, my father, decided to leave his father's building business in 1965 and came down to London, following what his sister had come to London, and the family then sort of followed on. I uh, I found myself after a couple of years doing art in a very good school in Dulwich, not actually Dulwich College, but there was a very good school which had an art department which prepared people for art school in a way that only other art schools were able to do at that time. So this was a unique art department in a school called Kingsdale School. It still exists, and it's still sort of flourishing, really. From there, I found within a couple of years I was facing Hornsey College of Art and applying to go there. So I went to Hornsey, um, got in, but strangely enough, this is 1968. The college didn't open. The students took over the college. It was 1968, student revolution time, and I found myself taking part in a commune sort of situation up in Hornsey with the students, and that was quite exciting in many respects. But I wasn't painting, I wasn't drawing, wasn't doing anything. I was just racing around, organizing benefit dances and things like that, and meeting foreign film crews at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was a weird but wonderful time in many respects. Um, the college didn't open until November that year. When it opened, I finally saw that basically people weren't going to settle down. It was just going to be political discussions and meetings and so on and so forth. So I asked around and I got a place in Ravensbourne College of Art, which was south of London on the edge of the countryside. And I remember looking out the window in the first time I was there and seeing cows in a field, and I thought, I think this might do. This might be a good place to be. Um, I had a kind of checkered career there in the sense that I got on extremely well with a great group of staff mainly and a couple of students, and we had I mean a really good time in terms of sort of looking at work, looking at art, going to private views, doing all sorts of things. And during that time, though, I was being kind of I don't know what the word is. I was kind of targeted as if I was a communist from Eastern Europe, because I'd come from Hornsey. What was I going to do? Was I going to be disruptive? Was I going to be difficult? And I said, no, 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 of course not. But of course, I did become disruptive and difficult, and student leader and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't very sort of satisfying in the end because I realized that I hadn't got very much out of it in terms of sort of political advancement for students within the college. They were still sort of being treated in a very 1960s way. They were kept under the thumb. But anyway, I came out saying I'm not going to make art. I'm not interested in art. My final show was included the first picture that we'll see, where I was writing on canvas and destroying canvases. And when they decided to tidy up the art school studio for the final show, what this probably happens in all art schools, they tidy up the studios, they paint the floor black, they paint the walls white, they hang the work as if it's a sort of West End gallery or a major gallery. I had my space sectioned off. I said, I'm not having it cleaned up. I'll have it as it is. And I covered it with the walls with polythene and spread red gloss paint all over the place. I was just going crazy basically. And I called the whole thing Santa Monica Slaughterhouse Carnival. Now, where I got that from, I'm not entirely sure, but around that time I was kind of influenced by Captain Beefheart and his magic band, and I'd actually got to know them as well, and met them over here and spent quite a bit of time with them. So that was a heavy influence, sort of a literary influence. But the other one, just before, a couple of years before that, was the Liverpool poets in this country: Roger McGough, Adrian Henry, and Brian Patten. And that book of poetry influenced me in my last years at school to the extent that I didn't pass my English exams. I was just reading poets, and these Liverpool poets were very sort of art school poets, basically. So by the time I was out of that whole education morass, I was writing more than I was painting, and I was kind of vowing never to get involved in the art scene because we'd done studies of private views during the time I was there and found them to be rather sort of awful affairs. People were sort of networking for their own purposes all the time. It wasn't really about the art, but anyway. So that's yeah, I came out as a sort of I went in as a rebel of a sort, and I came out how did I come out? Still trying to rebel. I think that's a kind of theme, really. Not always a useful one, but it is a theme.
So I noticed a lot of your work is, well, actually almost all your work is abstract to a certain degree. Did you ever try realism at all, or did you just jump right
Yeah.
into abstract
I,
painting?
I did actually when I left college. Having never really done anything particularly figurative there. A lot of, as I say, a lot of writing was done on canvas. Um, but when I left, I started doing very small, very figurative gouache on card. So I was almost doing postcard-sized pictures. I lived in a very small flat at the time. Um, and these pictures were, yeah, they were particularly figurative, and they related to all sorts of things. And I'd collect sort of images from magazines, and magazine images were a kind of an impetus for creating slightly surreal pictures. Um, and then I was also drawing stones a lot and painting stones, just sort of. I'd take a stone in front of me, but I'd kind of elaborate it and make it into something else. I've never believed in painting on stones, but I do believe in painting stones. They're beautiful things.
Okay, let's take a look at some of your work now, and you could tell more about your evolvement as an artist.
Yes, so Philip, I'm so interested to hear about your literary influences.
Hmm.
Um, can you tell us about the combination of writing and painting in this one, please?
Well, the way things sort of usually happened, and there are probably about half a dozen paintings like this. They're not in existence anymore, but half a dozen paintings like this, where I would try to illustrate an idea, um, and within this, you can see that I think there's a bed and an envelope and various bits and pieces. To be honest, I don't know anymore exactly what they refer to. Um, but then I would take sort of tissue paper and white emulsion paint and almost obliterate the image, and sometimes completely obliterate the image. Um, and taking a black felt tip pen, I would simply sort of I'd either do a sort of improvised piece, or it might be something that I had written at the, before the actual canvas. Um, so in this, I mean, I haven't read it, to be honest, for a long time. Um, but the poetry, in a sense, was influenced by more or less by Captain Beefheart's work, Don Van Vliet's work. Um, as I said, I got to know him and would sort of talk about things with him, but also I simply was bowled over by the way his poetry all the time, his lyrics. And I think I was trying to do sort of similar things. Obviously, you try to avoid purely copying, but at the same time, you have to learn somehow, and that was my way. He was a painter, of course, as well. I don't know if everybody knows that, but he was a serious painter.
And where did this idea of combining the two come from? Who influenced you to do that?
Well, I think at art school, my main influence, I think, was Robert Rauschenberg. He was somebody that I took to in the same way as I took to Beefheart, in the sense that I was kind of obsessed by his work and interested in his work. And um, there were one or two. There's another. Trying to think of. There's a chap called John Latham, an English painter and sort of book artist of a kind. He was interesting to me. And there was I'm afraid I can't remember the name, but there was another British painter who used words quite a lot. And I think the Liverpool poets, amongst them, Adrian Henry was a painter as well as a poet. Um, and to be honest, the move to just write poetry onto canvas, I think, was more or less my own. I hadn't seen it done by anybody else, but I was certainly influenced by people who would use different methods and certainly use words. Strangely enough, at the time, I had no knowledge whatsoever of Cy Twombly, who I don't know what my career had been like if I'd met him at art school. I had no idea, but I did meet his work later on.
The bed in the picture actually, for me, is reminiscent of Van Gogh's famous picture of his room. Was that in your mind at all, or was just that coincidental?
I think it's coincidental, but to be honest, it reminds me of that as well. Whenever I look at it, I'm looking at this, yeah, similar thing. And there's a nice sort of yellow spot there, which could be a sunflower. You never know.
This one, obviously, the substrate is a page from a phone book.
It is, yeah.
Have you used other substrates? Do you experiment with that, or is this kind of a one-off?
No, I did a long series. There are about 30 or 40 of these, and it was again the idea was that a random sort of picking of a name, which I think was added on after the figure. The figures were sometimes sort of monoprints, sometimes painted directly on. Um, and they came from an African, I think it was from an African vase or something like that. I got a figure from that, and the shape of the figures was sort of um, forever after was that sort of basic shape with a small head, sort of large arms, large lower body. I used it in various different things, different ways.
And what does the title refer to?
It's just one of the names on the phone book. So that's the page is the E's is a selection of E's. Um, there are a number, and that the name is just plucked out of the page.
That's
I like the idea. I mean, sorry to interrupt. I like the idea of a random combination of word and image. I used to teach graphic design as well as drawing and painting, and I would often get the students to put together for an advertising campaign that to put together a word with something which is totally unrelated, and that was kind of always an interesting challenge. Here, the Edicrom, what could it be? I don't know. I mean, it's very straightforward, but the magic is that anybody can create anything from it.
Okay, what is the connection between these three images here?
Well, these three images are all based on a beach in Ayrshire in Scotland, where I spent a lot of my time as a child, as a young teenager. Maidens Pink, the sand on Maidens is the name of the village on the coast. It was also the village that my art teacher Bill Lockhart lived in. Um, and the sand on Maiden's Beach is pink because it comes from red granite on an island called Ailsa Craig. I mean, over millennia, the red granite produces a sort of pink within the sand. Um, Black Malin Rock. I continued my drawing rocks and stones, and basically, what happened was I'd been away from Scotland for a long time. Sorry, I'll just go on to the third one. Malin Pinks is just another version of the sand and rocks and water and so on. So they're quite figurative in a way. Um, I'd been away from Scotland for a long time, and I'd been drawing and painting a lot of sort of circular shapes, and I wasn't sure what I was doing or where I was going. And when I went back to Scotland in 1997, I think it was, or it might have been earlier, um, I discovered that everything that I used to know was smaller than it had been 20 years before. Like my school looked smaller, my house looked smaller, and so on and so forth. But when I came out to the coast, the island of Ailsa Craig, which is out in the Firth of Clyde, looked bigger than I'd ever seen it before. It was just this kind of vast image in front of me. And I went down to the shore, and I thought, I've been trying to paint stones all this time. That's what I've been trying to do. All these sort of separate shapes below my feet on my, where I was walking. And that was a kind of revelatory moment in the sense that I went back and started doing these paintings, this kind of painting. Um, so yeah, I mean, I didn't want to stay with my home shore too long in the sense that I wanted to sort of be able to do things near where I live now, which and have lived in London since 1966. Um, so I did go back to various beaches and do other works related to this.
Thank you.
This piece to me looks like a precursor to the rest of your work. It looks like departure from the first pieces we look at.
You're absolutely 100% right. Um, this was the painting that where I'd been doing stones and I did lots of paintings of stones. And around that time, I had discovered Cy Twombly's work. And there were a lot of stone paintings that had drawing and sort of um, crayon work and drawing and so on all over them. Um, but then when it came to paint, the use of paint, it was very sort of conservative, and the stones were all kind of grey and greyish blue and greyish brown and so on. But they were stones. Um, and when it came to this one, I can't be absolutely sure what made me do it, but I had taken some photographs on the beach at Littlehampton on the south coast, English south coast, and I was working directly from those photographs in the sense that if you look at this, the white at the top is reflection in water. The shapes are stones, um, most of them, some shells and stones. And I just thought I can't just keep doing the same thing. I don't want to just draw from this photograph. I want to do something else. So I simply took my hands to it and started messing the whole thing up. And in messing it all up, this painting, which still exists in my studio, and I resisted selling it, um, it was that sort of breakthrough moment. You can do anything. You can sort of play with it. You can really play with it, and don't have to necessarily construct something or indeed copy something. So play came into it. Play I thought has always been very, very important to me, and that came also from Don Van Vliet, Captain Beefheart, who, when he was asked um, how he worked, we did an interview with him at the art school, and we said "What's your working day like?" And he said, "I don't work, I play." And I thought, well, that is what he does. Yeah, that is what we do. So that's the breakthrough, and I still look back to it quite a bit.
Well, it sounds like your rebellious nature kind of took over in this painting. Is that accurate?
I think that's probably true. Yeah, and I think it was. I mean, I taught for a long time in pretty rough secondary schools in London, and I'd always painted, always continued painting, and I did a lot of screen printing as well. I mean, I'd set up my studio in the school to be my screen printing studio and teaching room as well. Um, and that period of time, this is just when I stopped teaching actually, because I went till I was about 45, 46 and thought I don't want to do this anymore. They were difficult schools. They were difficult kids. The art rooms were becoming less and less important to the school, even though the results were really good. Um, we got higher, bigger and bigger classes, less and less money. And I thought, I cannot do this anymore. So I sort of basically went mad and ran away at 50. I could have retired early at 50, but they changed the goalposts, so I wasn't able to. So basically, I went out on medical grounds. I couldn't do it. Um, and this painting, I think, came at the right time. It came along with another painting which got into the John Moores competition in, I think it was 2000. Um, which was also a beach painting, a bit like this, but not quite didn't quite let go as much as it should have done. But unfortunately, that painting's not in this list. But yeah, this was the one. This is where yeah, decided that I could do what I wanted to do, which I suppose is a kind of rebellion.
So I can clearly see this rebellious spirit, this playful approach. But one of the criticisms that's sometimes leveled at abstract art is that it's apolitical. It's kind of removed from reality, from representation.
Yeah.
You clearly started off with that urge. Do you feel that your work, and maybe this piece in particular, is in any way political still?
Um, it's an interesting point, actually. I mean, it really up to this piece of work and these last couple of pieces of work, I was doing various things relating to war and in particular the Iraq War, and I did sketchbooks full of drawings relating to war and to bombing. And if you can imagine that the idea of bombing, you can almost see it in this painting, actually. I don't see this as being specifically about anything other than another beach, but there is there's a kind of lot of conflict going on within the imagery. So I had been more political. I do consider it, I do think about the idea that I should be doing something which relates more to current events. But as yet, other than with the use of writing, I'm not I don't find that there are images which can be easily easily used. I mean, I saw a picture yesterday of one of the photographs taken in LA during the fires of the interior of a house with books burning, and outside, lying on the pavement, it seemed, or lying on the paving, was a hose pipe coiled up. And I thought, well, there's a kind of a powerful image, and the whole sort of global warming thing. I say thing, I mean global warming and climate change, I think is another issue which I'd like to sort of refer to a bit more. But I'm not going to paint burning buildings, and I'm not going to paint extreme weather, or am I? I don't know. It's one of those things. I don't know what comes next.
That's very interesting. How do you think you might approach a topic, an issue like that? How might that kind of manifest or be expressed in your work?
I don't know. Think I think it probably would come through the use of words. I think more than it would from imagery. I mean, I say that I don't know whether I'm going to, I would paint a stormy weather or something like that. That's a possibility because I think my work sort of does edge towards that kind of landscape painting. And I'm certainly inspired by the work of people like Constable and Turner. Um, and within that, there is a possibility that, one can. I don't think it's necessarily an artist's job to draw attention to, but then maybe it is. Maybe it needs a certain amount from a world which is not directly dealing with things like climate change. Maybe it takes artists to be sort of looking at it and commenting on it. Not sure, really not sure.
So you talked a few minutes ago about playing and using play in your work. It looks like you're playing with some kind of idea in this image.
Yeah, this came about through a Greek friend who I've never been to Greece, and I don't actually travel very extensively at all. But I wanted to do something based on the Cyclades, the Cyclades, the Greek islands, and that's basically what these paintings are. They're a whole series based directly on the shapes of the islands. Um, and having done that, there are the sort of use of the dripping paint and a lot of whiteness, even though there's a lot of blue as well, is again quite heavily influenced by Twombly. I think it can be seen in some of them more than in others, in quite a lot of them actually.
Are you
So
using oil paint here?
this is oil on card or oil on board, yeah.
Hmm.
And I think also the influence of Twombly, who has worked in long series, and also things like his poems to the sea, inspired me to sort of do a grid of a number of pieces of work.
Hmm. And how big is each little image?
They're about well, they're about sort of what's A4? Do you know A4 size? A4. So they're not very big. They're about sort of large book size.
Yeah.
This, yeah, sorry, I'm jumping in.
Oh, go
No,
ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, please jump in.
I was just going to say that this is again I did a series um which were based on that village in Scotland on the coast, Maidens, and they involved references to Ailsa Craig as well. I did a lot of paintings which were sea and sand and shore and island based, um, and these were, I suppose, again that was at an early stage in the influence of Cy Twombly. So, which I think is kind of evident. But I didn't want to shy away from it. I just thought that, this is the way I want to paint. Not too long ago, I wrote a piece which came from a quote from Twombly, the quote was, "Because I'm also going." And I think that kind of sums up an awful lot about how we are influenced and what we are doing um, in terms of creative work. Why do you do it like that? Because I'm also going.
So obviously you're playing with minimalism here. So
Yeah.
what brought this on?
Well, literally, what brought this on, called Deluge, was in the summer of 2012. We had rain. I think it's specifically in July. We had rain, 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 and nothing but rain. And we have a number of large bushes in the garden, and they were just soaking wet all summer. And this was my response. It was just a poet friend wrote about them as being great gobs of something soaking something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a good enough description. So they're really that and about two or three other paintings of a very similar nature um, they're about the weather. They're but
Mm.
there's nothing written on it to either identify or complain about the rain. This is I I had a series of paintings. Sorry, a series of books that I was looking at, which were to do with Italian cities, and in particular, I got one from a friend about Siena, specifically about Siena. Um, I'm not sure why I wanted to do this, because it was quite a departure, and I love these paintings. And strangely enough, this one at the moment is in Los Angeles. I hope it's still there. I hope it still exists. In so there's a company called Soho House and Soho Home. So it's in a uh, basically in a show in Soho Home in Los Angeles. Um, I loved the towers and which of course were ancient towers. There are still some in existence, of course, but there used to be loads and loads of towers in Siena and in many other cities in Italy. Um, and I sort of took off. This was at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and we're heading into pandemic time with these. And there are about 40 paintings, not all big, not all sort of not all very big, most of them quite small actually. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it was that took me to it. I mean, I've not been to Siena, so I went to Siena on my own, if you see what I mean.
So this
Uh,
format is quite a bit different. So can you talk
yeah,
about that?
that's the Siena paintings. Most of the Siena paintings were done on two pieces of card, horizontal, side by side. These paintings were done on two pieces of board, and basically the top half, or the right or left half, if it was more horizontal than vertical, um, was done first. One side was done first. The top of this was done first, and then basically I'm kind of dragging it down into the bottom area, the secondary area, um, and creating something again. It's sort of messing the whole thing up, playing with it into that second area, and I've done that a lot, and a lot in this Field in England series in particular, um, which runs to over 200 paintings. This is quite small. I mean, it's about sort of in terms of inches, it's about, I don't know, 8 or 9 inches by 16.
This reminds me of maybe a sketch by Constable or Turner, like out in the field, just trying to capture maybe some of the colors that they've seen. We haven't really talked about color in your paintings, which is sometimes really subtle, here
Yeah.
really bold. How do you approach color?
Well, that tends to come from. I mean, this actually is directly from Constable. This particular arrangement of shapes from a painting called Branch Hill Pond, um, and he did a series of paintings of Branch Hill Pond in Hampstead. Uh, so that's where partly where the imagery in this comes from. I don't know. I think I was looking at a painting the other day, my most recent painting, which had a lot of blue, very deep blues and reds in it. And I looked on my phone, and my wife's photographs were, our photographs are combined for some odd reason, partly, I don't know what it is. I was looking at her photographs, and there was a teacup and a jug behind it. The teacup was almost the same blue as the painting, and so was the red flower on the jug. Um, I pick it up color, and I can I, I'm sure it's true of many artists, but I can mix any color. I mean, anything I see, I know how to mix it. It's just one of those things. I didn't never did color theory at any point. Um, So it's purely experimental, or it comes directly from something, which we'll see in a painting in a moment or two. But this series, A Field in England, is probably my most successful series in many respects. But then it can be done and can be used in various different ways. I'd studied Constable for a long time, read biography of him. I'm now reading a biography of Turner. So where that will lead, I'm not sure. But it'll lead into paint one way or another.
Wow.
This is directly from Constable, a whole series of Constable paintings, Constable related paintings, and this is a version of one of his cloud studies. It's as simple as that, and I like putting on the date, both the date that it was painted and the date that he painted, and that sort of there's again that relationship between word and image and time, I suppose as well.
Well, this piece seems a lot more complex than the previous ones we've seen. Seems like there's a lot going on in it.
Yeah, I think it kind of it it explains the difficulty in trying to paint like somebody like Constable. I think it's there are it's highly complex the way things are put down, and to try and sort of not so much redo it. I mean, I am transposing it in a sense, but at the same time, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to go away from it too much. And then, but at the same time as that, I want to sort of play around with it to make it to use pencil marks in it to let the paint drip and so on. So it is very complicated, I think, yeah. But at the same time, again, um, the lower half of this painting, there's not an awful lot going on. If you see, I mean that, so there's a certain amount of simplicity kept within the lower half, which I quite like to do.
How long did it take you to make this piece? Because it seems as though there are many layers. Obviously, some of them have bled into each other, but some of them must have dried. How long did it take you to make this?
It would be less than an hour.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's about A3 size, but it's not terribly big. But I do work very fast, nearly always. And I don't know, I occasionally think I'd like to spend more time than I think, but what for? To put more stuff in, to make it more complicated. Um, no, I'd rather sort of do more pieces and keep them very, very sort of simple. However, of course, that doesn't explain this, does it? Because it's not simple. But it's simple in the sense that it's done rapidly. I found a quote which I don't know if it's apposite at this point, but um, this is a quote from Turner saying, or from somebody writing about Turner, saying he drove the colors about on paper until an image emerged that expressed the idea in his mind. And I like the idea of driving the colors around um, to a point where I mean, it does meet the idea in your mind, but the idea is not a cloud or a study of a cloud by Constable or a paint. I mean, it's like a Robert Motherwell quote, which is you scan things externally and internally, where the object is not the world, but the painting itself. So I started doing flowers, and I did hundreds of them, and they went up on Instagram, and I sold hundreds of them through Instagram, and had a couple of exhibitions as well of them. So Flower of the Mountain is a quote from James Joyce from Molly Bloom's soliloquy in the Penelope section of Ulysses, um, where she says, "Yes, I was a flower of the mountain," and I thought that was I'd used James Joyce quotes a lot in painting in the past. Unfortunately, not many. No, no, none of that series of paintings is within this. Um, but the Flower of the Mountain, I had actually done. I discovered the other day, well, a few weeks ago, I discovered that I'd done about 10 years ago. I'd done a couple of Flower of the Mountain paintings, and they weren't of individual flowers, but they were fairly similar, actually. I like this one, and I like a lot of them. And the biggest success of it is a series of 18 flowers on a wall in a house in Switzerland. which was a deal kind of brokered by somebody in Florida, an interior designer in Florida. So, although I don't travel, my work does quite a bit.
This feels much more hmm, urban, gritty, I guess, as opposed to the previous one of a flower.
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
Well, where this came from, I was watching the recent film on Napoleon, and the Battle of Trafalgar part of it kind of struck me as being rather interesting visually, in particular. And then I realized that, again, back to this, whether I travel or not, I realized I'd actually been on that stretch of water because I'd been on a cruise when I was a school student and went through past the point of Trafalgar. And I thought, oh, well, I've got some kind of something invested in this. Maybe I should try doing some paintings of ships. Um, and the painting, I mean, there's a ship in behind the graffiti. Um, but what I did was I did all of the ships of the line. So I think there are 33 of them, 33 of the British ships that were at Trafalgar. And I did this very loose paintings of all of them. I think they came from the first one was kind of worked out the way it was done. So they were all a bit similar. I wasn't actually painting specifically different ships, but I did 33 of them, different colors, different sort of arrangements. And I thought, well, that's all very well, but they're not terribly interesting. They don't do anything. They don't, they're just a catalogue of ships. So I thought, well, maybe I should just mess them all up again. Um, and the writing on this actually says Swift Sure, or it may be titled anyway. Um, and this series hasn't actually gone anywhere yet, in the sense that it hasn't been shown anywhere. I think some of them have been on Instagram, but it would be a nice exhibition. I mean, to be honest, I've got hundreds of exhibitions, in the sense that I do so many paintings. Um, this would be quite a nice one, but it'd be a nice one to have somewhere like the National Maritime Museum in London. Um, but still, these are my thoughts upon it.
This looks like some more flowers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is, and I we were visiting friends of ours who'd had a series of um, cushions on their furniture. A series of new cushions on their furniture, and the background color to this was the color of the cushions, and I just thought they were amazing. I thought the color on these cushions was amazing. So I went home and did a painting based on photographs I'd taken of their cushions. Um, and that just that led to about sort of 20 odd paintings and two or three sort of quite big paintings. And in a sense, it's almost where I still am at the moment. I keep coming back to this arrangement in particular, of the red, the green, and now I'm using a very bright blue, as I said earlier on. Um, but they're less about flowers now. They're just abstract shapes, and they're part of a series of paintings called shuffle paintings, because I paint with an old iPod on shuffle nearly all the time. I'd be amazed that the iPod is still working. It's caked in paint and it produces all these amazing songs from shuffle. So the paintings are shuffling. And yeah, this is one of that series. I also called the series A Country Life. Um, and that occasionally is written on it. There is something written on this in that sort of creamy color in the background, but to be honest, I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's after a visit to. Um, I think it's after a visit to Jenny and Graham's, something like that. It's written in it because those are the people that we went to see. This is one of the sea battles, a series done in relation to the Battle of Trafalgar. Um, but the most of the imagery within it came from an unidentified 19th century painting of a ship firing cannon. So if you can you can actually see that imagery within it. If you see the curves beside the two curves beside the sort of white explosion, you're looking at the back of a ship, and the white explosion is a cannon firing. But you know, it doesn't have to be. If it's seen as sea battle, you can maybe find that. And that there are about three or no, there's more than three or four, but this is quite a sort of fairly big one. It's about a meter by a meter and a bit. I do like to be able to use my hands and my fingers rather than my hands. So if I go to a bigger painting, I'm not going to get sort of. I often thought maybe you should get just really big gloves and start playing with the painting like that. But no, it's not about that. It's not about that. It's something to do with at any size doing the same thing, more or less.
I asked you specifically if we could add this to the list because when I first saw this on Instagram, I found it arresting. I mean, I just spent some time looking at it. It just felt so three-dimensional.
Yeah, it's that's again a painting that comes directly from the photographs of the cushions, in the sense that it doesn't come directly; it comes through that channel, and this is more or less what I'm doing now. Um, but I'm using, as I said, this sort of red, blue, green. In fact, quite a bit of primary color, in the sense that there's also yellow within the ones I'm doing now. This series, um, I added to recently. I added two or three pieces recently. They went up on Instagram. Um, I think this is probably one of the best, one of the most exciting ones. And I don't know if it is to do with a kind of three-dimensionality. That may be partly to do with a kind of rubbing out in certain places, which does create a different level of space and a different quality of paint. Um, but it has nothing directly to do with a Haydn symphony. I mean, that's just what I'm shuffling at the time. So it's another shuffle painting.
I'm curious, were you listening to the symphony? Because I listened to a little bit of the symphony last night just to kind of give myself a little background on it.
Yeah, yeah, I was at the time, and I listened to Haydn a lot. Actually, I mean, I listened to him a lot because he was always on my iPod a lot, so he keeps coming up. Yeah. And I don't know. I think maybe there's a slightly more classical bent on these kind of colors, and this sort of painting. But it's you can sort of speculate, and I can speculate, but it's just that sort of interesting combination again of title and color and paint.
From Beefheart to Haydn.
Yeah, and everything else in between.
That was great. I really enjoyed hearing you talk about it. You mentioned you do paintings quite quickly. Like, how many paintings do you do, say, in a week?
In a week, well, if I'm when things are sort of going fairly well, and I'm maybe in the middle of a series, um, I will do sort of two or three a day. I think the reason why I work the way I work is because I used to teach, and I also worked part-time in a bookshop for a long time. Um, so I always, when I taught, I did it because I had a family and I needed an income, and I wasn't making enough through painting. So I had to paint in the spaces in between, and I've always done that. And now that I don't do anything else, I'm still happy to paint in the spaces in between, and that means that I'll read, or we'll go out to the country, go walking, do various different things, and so on. And there's always stuff to do. I've got grandchildren as well, so um, it's you've always got to put it in the spaces in between, really. I think that's the thing. But I do it rather quickly.
Well, while we were talking, I was thinking about automatic writing, and the way you described how you paint.
Yeah.
I thought of your paintings as automatic paintings. Does that term fit, or is that
That
just
does fit. That's really good, actually. That does fit, because I was thinking about it. Obviously, coming to talk to you, I was thinking, what is it? How do I describe how I paint, what I do? And in a sense, yes, it's automatic. It's improvisatory, but it's not. improvisatory to the extent that it's got to be abstract or got to be anything. It can be any one of a number of things, but certainly automatic. Yeah, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we have to bring this conversation to a close, but I'm so thrilled that you agreed to have a talk with us. And
Well, I enjoyed it, and your questions and everything are really apposite, and I think your understanding of the work is really good. So I appreciate it.
thank you, Philip. So we'll see you on Instagram.
Mm,
Okay. Yeah.
thank you so much.
Okay, take
Thank
care.
you, Paul. Bye bye, Paul. Bye bye, Alan.